I used to believe my life was ordinary, the kind of story that never made headlines, never became a cautionary tale. It was safe, predictable, maybe even enviable from the outside. At least, that's what I told myself. Every morning began the same way. The soft hum of the coffee maker, the muffled giggles of my kids chasing each other down the hallway, and Ethan's low voice on a conference call in the next room before the sun had even fully risen. It was domestic choreography, mechanical, rehearsed, almost comforting. We'd been married for 12 years, and in that time I'd built my world around the idea that we were solid. But the thing about illusions is that they're most convincing right before they shatter. Clara Mitchell, that's me, 37 years old, mother of two, wife to Ethan Mitchell, a senior account executive at a big marketing firm downtown. On paper, we were the American dream: two healthy kids, a 3-bedroom home in a leafy suburb, and a golden retriever named Baxter who shed more hair than seemed biologically possible. But reality was quieter, less perfect. It was the sound of forks clinking against plates at breakfast while Ethan scrolled through emails instead of talking to me. It was the way he smelled faintly of cologne when he came home late, cologne I hadn't bought him. It was the constant hum of distance between us, disguised as busy schedules. "Don't forget the PTA meeting at 6, I said one morning, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs across the counter. Ethan didn't look up from his phone. "Can't make it. Client dinner, you'll have to cover it." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Of course," I murmured, plastering on a smile for the kids. I'd gotten good at that, hiding disappointment behind domestic efficiency. After breakfast, I packed lunchboxes with peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices, kissing our daughter Emma on the forehead and ruffling Ben's hair before they sprinted to the bus stop. Ethan left shortly after, suit jacket draped over his arm, phone pressed to his ear. He kissed my cheek, a perfunctory brush of lips that felt more like routine than affection, and was gone before I could say goodbye. The house was always too quiet after they left. That's when the thoughts crept in, the ones I tried to push down during the chaos of the morning. When did we stop talking about dreams? When did "I love you" turn into "I'm busy"? When did I start feeling more like a roommate than a wife? I'd given up a lot for this life. A promising job in publishing. Friends I used to see weekly, even hobbies that once made me feel alive, all in the name of building a home, raising our children, and supporting Ethan's career. And for a while, I was content with that trade-off. But lately, something had shifted. It was subtle at first. A missed date night here, a secretive phone call there. Then came the late nights, always for work, he said. And then there was the cologne, the expensive watch I didn't recognize, the hotel charge he brushed off as a client meeting offsite. I told myself not to be paranoid. Ethan was a good man, a loyal husband. We had history, 12 years, 2 kids, countless memories. People like us didn't fall apart. Right. It was lunch with my friend Marissa that finally cracked something inside me. We were sitting at our usual cafe downtown, sipping iced lattes and sharing a slice of cheesecake we swore we wouldn't order. "You're too trusting, Clara," she said, shaking her head after I mentioned Ethan's recent late nights. "If Daniel started acting weird like that, I'd be checking his location faster than you can say divorce attorney." I laughed it off at the time, but her words stuck with me like a burr under my skin. Too trusting, was I? That night, I watched Ethan through the kitchen doorway as he typed away on his laptop. His phone buzzed twice. He picked it up, glanced at the screen, and immediately flipped it face down. "Who's texting you so late?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Work," he replied without looking up. "Big presentation next week." I nodded, forcing a smile, but the truth was I didn't believe him, not entirely. A small, desperate act. The idea came to me a few days later, a small, shameful whisper that I tried to ignore. "Just check, for your peace of mind." I'd installed a family locator app years ago when Emma started walking to school on her own. It was still on Ethan's phone. He'd agreed to it back then without hesitation. It wasn't spying, I reasoned. It was just information, a way to quiet the storm in my head. The following Thursday, Ethan mentioned casually, too casually, that he'd be working late again. "Big pitch," he said, kissing the top of my head as he headed out the door. "Don't wait up." My heart fluttered with unease as I waved him goodbye. And then, once he was gone, I opened the app. There it was, a small blue dot labeled Ethan. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that it would stay pinned at his office all night, and I'd feel silly for even doubting him. At first, it did. He drove to the firm's downtown building, and the dot didn't move for an hour. I tried to focus on making dinner, helping Emma with her math homework, reading Ben a bedtime story. But every 20 minutes, I found myself checking again. And then at 8:13 p.m., the dot moved. A shift in the atmosphere. It wasn't toward the freeway or the nearest restaurant. It was heading west, away from downtown, away from his office. I stared at the screen, my pulse thudding in my ears. Probably a late client meeting, I muttered under my breath. Could be anything. But the longer I watched, the more my stomach twisted. The dot stopped moving at 8:37 p.m. in a residential neighborhood I didn't recognize. I zoomed in. It wasn't an office building. It wasn't a restaurant. It was a house. Cracks turned to fissures. I felt dizzy. The kitchen light seemed too bright, the walls too close. My hands trembled as I refreshed the app again and again, hoping it was a glitch. But the dot didn't move. He was still there for 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour. At 9:41 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan, running late, don't wait up, love you. The room spun. The blue dot on the screen told a different story. And for the first time, I wasn't sure which version of Ethan to believe. The man who kissed me goodbye this morning, or the stranger parked in front of someone else's home at 10 p.m. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror that night, studying the woman staring back at me. There were faint lines around my eyes I hadn't noticed before. My hair, once vibrant, was dull from years of neglect. And my smile, the smile I used to wear so easily, was nowhere to be found. "What are you doing?" I whispered to my reflection. "What are you afraid to see?" I knew the answer. I was terrified that the life I'd built was a lie, that I wasn't a wife anymore but a placeholder, that Ethan had already replaced me, not in the future, but in the present. The moment everything changes. I told myself I wouldn't look again, that I'd delete the app and trust my husband. But the next evening, when Ethan mentioned another late night, I opened it without thinking. The dot moved again, not to his office, but to the same neighborhood. The same house. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. The fear, the denial, the endless rationalizing, it all gave way to a cold, trembling certainty. Something was very, very wrong. I had a choice, keep pretending or find out the truth. I didn't know it then, but that single decision, that tiny, trembling finger tapping directions on a GPS app, would unravel everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my family, and myself. And that was the night the illusion ended. The night I decided I would no longer be the woman who didn't want to know. I didn't sleep that night. I don't even remember closing my eyes. Every time I did, my mind replayed the same scene, the little blue dot on the map, the residential street, the house I'd never seen before. And Ethan's message, running late, don't wait up, love you. Those 4 words had always felt safe before. Now they felt poisonous. By morning, I was hollow. I moved through my routine like a ghost, packing lunches, tying shoelaces, kissing cheeks. Emma asked if I was okay, and I lied without hesitation. Just tired, sweetie. I was getting good at lying to my kids, to myself, to the reflection in the mirror that kept asking, what if it's true? The day dragged on. Every hour stretched thin, heavy with unspoken questions. Ethan had kissed me goodbye like nothing was wrong. He even joked about dinner plans for the weekend. It was all so normal, too normal, like a performance rehearsed to perfection. And maybe it had been for longer than I was willing to admit. By 6 in the evening, the anxiety had built into something physical, a gnawing ache in my chest, a tremor in my hands. My rational mind screamed at me to stop, to delete the app, to let it go. But curiosity, or maybe survival, had already taken over. When Ethan texted, working late again, big client dinner, don't wait up, I felt my stomach drop. My hands moved before I could second-guess them. The dot was downtown again, right where it should be. At least for the first hour. I stared at it on and off as I cleaned the kitchen and tucked the kids into bed, convincing myself I was just paranoid. That Marissa's words had gotten under my skin. that I was creating a problem that didn't exist. At 8:21 p.m., the dot moved. Not just moved, it traced a deliberate path away from the office, winding through streets I didn't recognize. My heart hammered so hard I thought I might pass out. My breath came shallow, shaky. There was no reason for him to be heading west again. No reason at all. I stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, watching the little icon crawl across the map until it stopped. Same street, same house. My phone buzzed with a new text. Might be later than I thought. Big opportunity tonight. Opportunity, that word felt like a knife. I don't know what possessed me, but suddenly I was moving. Pulling on a coat, grabbing my keys, telling myself I was just going to drive by. Just to see. Just to know. Because the not knowing was killing me faster than any truth ever could. The drive was a blur, 25 minutes of headlights and shallow breaths, my heart thudding louder with every passing block. I almost turned back twice. What if I was wrong? What if it was innocent? But another voice, cold, logical, insistent, whispered back, and what if it's not? The neighborhood was quiet, lined with maple trees whose leaves rustled under the streetlights. Perfect, peaceful. I parked a block away, far enough that my headlights wouldn't give me away. My hands were shaking as I stared down the street, my eyes fixed on the house where the dot had stopped. A light was on in the front room. Through the thin curtains, I could see movement, shadows crossing, a figure passing by. And then I saw him, Ethan, my husband, laughing, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at me in years. The sound didn't reach me through the glass, but I didn't need to hear it. His body language told me everything. Relaxed, at ease, happy. Then another figure appeared. A woman. Younger than me, maybe early 30s, with dark hair pulled into a loose bun. She walked up behind him and slipped her arms around his waist like it was the most natural thing in the world. And he didn't pull away. He leaned into her touch. I felt my knees buckle. The world tilted. I clutched the steering wheel to keep from collapsing. Every muscle in my body screamed to get out of there, to run and never look back. But I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, watching my husband live a life I knew nothing about. Then came the moment that nearly broke me. A small figure ran into the room, a child, maybe 4 or 5 years old. Ethan bent down and scooped them into his arms, spinning them around as they squealed with joy. The woman clapped her hands, laughing. Ethan kissed the top of the child's head and said something I couldn't hear. And then the child said it, clear even through the glass, even across the street. "Daddy." My breath caught, my vision blurred. I think I actually whispered no to no one. I don't remember the drive home. I don't remember turning off the ignition or walking through the front door. All I remember is the bathroom floor, cold against my legs, unforgiving under my knees, and the sound of my own sobs echoing off the tiles. I cried until there was nothing left, until the tears dried into salt on my cheeks and my throat burned, and even then the ache didn't stop. It settled deeper, into a part of me I didn't know existed, a part that would never be the same again. By the time Ethan came home, it was nearly 2 in the morning. I heard his key turn in the lock, the soft creak of the door. I scrubbed my face with a towel and stumbled into bed, pretending to sleep. My heart raced as he quietly changed clothes and slipped under the covers beside me. "Long day," he whispered into the darkness. I didn't respond. My body was rigid, my breaths too even. I wondered if he could feel my heartbeat pounding against the mattress, if he knew I'd seen everything, if he could sense that something inside me had cracked beyond repair. The next morning, he kissed my cheek before leaving for work, just like he always did. "Love you," he said, as if the night before had never happened, as if our life wasn't a carefully constructed lie. I stood at the window after he left, watching his car disappear down the street. The autumn air seeped through the cracks in the frame, chilling my skin. Everything looked the same quiet street, the same neat lawns, the same blue sky, but nothing was the same anymore, and I knew it never would be. I spent the day oscillating between denial and rage. Maybe the child wasn't his. Maybe it was a client, a relative, a friend. Maybe there was a rational explanation, but deep down, I knew better. The way he'd held that woman, the way he'd kissed that child, those weren't the gestures of a stranger. They were the gestures of someone with roots, with a second life. And then the guilt crept in. What had I done wrong? Was I too boring, too predictable. Had I failed him somehow? I hated myself for thinking that way, for shouldering the blame for a betrayal I hadn't committed. But when your world collapses, logic is the first casualty. That night, he was working late again. I didn't bother checking the app. I didn't need to. The truth had already taken shape, ugly and undeniable. And yet, I said nothing. I cooked dinner, helped with homework, read bedtime stories, smiled for the kids, all while carrying a secret that was too heavy to speak aloud. Before bed, I stood in front of the mirror again. The woman staring back at me looked older than she had a week ago. Her eyes were red-rimmed and tired, but beneath the exhaustion was something new, something raw and simmering. Anger, maybe, or resolve. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen, and I couldn't go back to pretending everything was fine. The foundation of my life had cracked, and the fractures were spreading fast. For now, I stayed silent. For now, I watched and waited. But deep down, a decision was taking shape, a decision that would change everything. The next time he said he was working late, I wouldn't just track the blue dot, I would follow it. And when I did, there would be no turning back. The third time it happened, I was ready. I didn't bother pretending I believed him anymore. When Ethan kissed my cheek that Thursday morning and said he might be late at the office again, I just nodded and smiled. My heart didn't even lurch this time. It was steady, unnervingly so, like it knew the worst had already happened. The plan formed slowly throughout the day, taking shape between grocery store aisles and traffic lights. This time, I wouldn't just watch from behind a screen. I wouldn't hide behind excuses and denial. I needed to see it with my own eyes, not from a block away, not through a windshield, but up close. I needed the truth, no matter how much it destroyed me. By the time Ethan texted, big client dinner. Late again. Don't wait up, my mind was made up. I called my sister and asked if she could come over to watch the kids. I told her I wasn't feeling well and needed some air. She didn't ask questions. Maybe she heard something in my voice. Maybe she just didn't want to. The night air was cold, biting against my skin as I slid into the driver's seat. I turned off my phone's volume and entered the address I'd memorized from the GPS map. My hands shook slightly as I gripped the steering wheel, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was adrenaline, a sharp, relentless current running through me. The neighborhood was just as I remembered. Quiet, picturesque, almost painfully normal. Rows of tidy lawns, porch lights glowing softly, a faint scent of wood smoke in the air. I parked farther away this time, 3 houses down, engine off, lights out. My heart thudded in my chest as I stared at the house I now knew wasn't just any house. It was the house. The lights inside were on. Through a gap in the curtains, I could see a sliver of the living room, a sofa, a lamp, a painting I didn't recognize. And him, Ethan, my husband, laughing, smiling, sitting comfortably with his arm draped over the back of the couch as if he lived there. The woman appeared a moment later, carrying a tray with glasses on it. She placed it on the coffee table and sat beside him, close, too close, their knees touching. He leaned toward her, said something that made her laugh, and for a second I almost didn't recognize him. This wasn't the man who came home exhausted and distant. This wasn't the man who sighed when I asked about his day. This man looked alive. Then the child entered the room, the same little one I'd seen before. Tonight, I could see them clearly. A little boy with dark curls and eyes so familiar they made my stomach twist. He ran into Ethan's arms, squealing, and Ethan scooped him up and kissed his cheek with a tenderness I hadn't seen from him in years. "Daddy, can you help me build the tower?" The boy's voice was muffled by the glass, but I heard the word that mattered. Daddy. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle the sob that tore through me. My whole body felt cold, like someone had opened me up and let the night air pour in. They disappeared into another room, maybe the kitchen, and I sat there for what felt like hours, my breath fogging the windshield, my body numb. Questions swirled in my mind, each more painful than the last. How long had this been going on? Did he love her? Did he love them more than us? And the question that hurt the most, had he ever truly loved me? I wasn't sure what I intended to do when I got out of the car. Maybe I thought I'd march up to that door and demand answers. Maybe I thought I'd scream until the whole neighborhood heard me. But when my feet hit the pavement, I moved quietly, almost reverently, like I was walking toward a grave. I crept closer, every instinct screaming at me to turn back, but I couldn't. I had to see more. I had to understand. Through the larger front window, I saw them gathered around a small dining table. The woman, Lena, I would later learn was pouring wine. Ethan was helping the boy with his dinner. It was domestic, intimate, ordinary. Like 1,000 dinners I had made for him myself, but there was a warmth here, a softness I hadn't seen in our house for years. They looked like a family. I staggered back from the window, my breath shallow, my hands trembling so violently I could barely hold my phone. I turned and stumbled down the sidewalk, half running, half falling back to my car. I slammed the door shut and gasped for air, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I don't remember the drive home. I don't remember walking through the front door or climbing the stairs. I only remember the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, louder than anything else. When I finally collapsed on the bathroom floor, the sobs came again, raw, broken, primal. They shook me until I was empty, until there was nothing left inside but a hollow ache. I thought I knew betrayal. I thought I'd imagined the worst. But this was something deeper. It wasn't just an affair. It was a second life. A parallel reality where I didn't exist, where my children didn't exist, where we never happened. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, eyes swollen and red, cheeks streaked with tears. Why? I whispered, the word barely audible. Why wasn't I enough? The house was silent. Ethan was still out, probably tucking his other son into bed, maybe kissing Lena goodnight. And here I was, choking on the shards of a life I'd spent 12 years building. When he finally came home, it was nearly 3 a.m. I heard the door open, the soft thud of his shoes on the hallway floor. I didn't move. I didn't want to see his face. I didn't want to hear his lies. He paused at the bedroom door. "You awake?" he asked softly. I kept my eyes closed, feigning sleep. My heart was a drumbeat against my ribs. "Big night," he whispered. "Love you." And just like that, he slipped into bed beside me, his breathing slow and steady within minutes. How easily he slept. How effortlessly he lied. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling. The image of that little boy burned into my mind. I couldn't stop seeing the way Ethan's eyes softened when he looked at him. A softness I hadn't seen directed at me or our children in years. By morning, something inside me had shifted. The grief was still there, heavy and suffocating, but beneath it was something harder, colder, a flicker of determination that scared me with its clarity. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. If Ethan wanted to live 2 lives, I was going to make sure he paid for it. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but I wasn't going to spend another decade trapped in someone else's lie. I looked at my reflection one more time before heading downstairs to wake the kids. I barely recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were different now. Sharper, older, stronger. This was no longer about heartbreak. It was about survival. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't as powerless as I'd always believed. He thought he could lie to me forever. He thought he could live 2 lives without consequence. But he had underestimated me. And soon, very soon, he was going to regret it. I spent the next few days in a strange limbo, somewhere between numbness and obsession. My body moved through the motions of life, but my mind was trapped in loops of memory and suspicion. Every time Ethan kissed me goodbye, I wondered if he'd done the same to her. Every smile he gave me felt rehearsed, every excuse rehearsed. The man I thought I knew so well had become a stranger wearing his skin. I told myself I needed to think, but thinking only made it worse. Questions piled up like clutter in my chest. Was the boy really his son? How long had it been going on? Was I the other woman in my own marriage? I tried to distract myself, volunteering at the kids' school, baking cookies I didn't even want to eat, going on long walks around the neighborhood, but the moment I stopped moving, the reality came crashing back. I couldn't outrun it. I couldn't unsee that house, that woman, that child calling him daddy. One night, while Ethan was showering, I sat at his desk and opened his laptop. My hands trembled as I typed in his password, our wedding date. It worked. That stung more than I expected. He was careless because he never thought I'd look. Emails, credit card statements, calendar invites, the proof was all there, hidden in plain sight. Hotel bookings labeled as client retreats. Dinner reservations for 2. Wire transfers to a woman named Lena Carter. The timeline stretched back nearly 5 years. 5 years. My hands went cold. That meant he'd been seeing her while I was pregnant with Ben. The betrayal burned deeper than I thought possible. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a fling. It was a second life built carefully and deliberately while I was at home folding laundry and making school lunches. When he walked into the room, toweling his hair, I slammed the laptop shut. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine," I said, forcing a smile. My voice didn't even shake. I was learning how to hide my rage. That night, I lay awake listening to his breathing beside me, thinking of every lie he'd ever told. Every, "I love you." Every, "You're my everything." I used to believe those words. Now they tasted like ash. Over the next week, I collected evidence. I printed bank statements and copied email threads. I took screenshots of his location history and the messages he'd sent while sitting in Lena's living room. The more I uncovered, the stronger I felt. Each piece of proof was like a weapon, and I was building an arsenal. But with the strength came a new kind of pain, not just betrayal, but the weight of my own silence. I hated myself for smiling at him over dinner, for laughing at his jokes, for letting him tuck the kids into bed like nothing had changed. My silence made me complicit, and I was done being complicit. The decision came on a rainy Tuesday evening. He texted that he'd be home late, another client dinner. I set the table anyway, lit candles, poured wine. The house was spotless, the kids asleep. It was all so painfully domestic that it almost felt like a cruel joke. When he walked in just after 10, he looked surprised. "What's all this?" "Dinner," I said evenly. "I thought we could spend some time together." His smile was cautious. "That's nice, but you didn't have to." I poured him a glass of wine and watched him sip it. My hands were steady, my voice calm, but inside, every nerve was electric. "Do you love me, Ethan?" I asked. He blinked, startled. "Of course I do. Why would you even ask that?" "Because," I said softly, "I need to know if you're lying when you say it." The room went still, his smile faltered. "What's going on, Clara?" I reached under the table and pulled out a manila folder, bank statements, screenshots, photos. I dropped it in front of him. "This," I said, "this is what's going on." He stared at it, silent. I watched his face drain of color as he flipped through the pages. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was barely a whisper. "How long have you known?" "Long enough." He put his head in his hands. "Clara, I'm so sorry." "Don't," I snapped. My voice cracked, the first real crack in my composure. "Don't you dare say you're sorry. Sorry is forgetting to take out the trash. Sorry is being 5 minutes late. Sorry isn't this." Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. "How long?" 4 years, he said quietly. "Almost 5. I laughed, a sharp, hollow sound that didn't feel like mine. 5 years, while I was pregnant, while I was raising our children, while I was building a life for us, you were building one somewhere else. "It wasn't supposed to happen," he said, the words tumbling out now. "I ran into Lena at a conference. We started talking. I didn't plan for any of it." "Didn't plan for it?" I hissed. "You booked hotel rooms, you bought gifts, you had a child with her. That's not a mistake, Ethan. That's a choice, over and over again." He reached for my hand, and I pulled it away like his touch burned. "I love you," he said desperately. "I never stopped loving you." "Then what is she?" I demanded. "What is he? Because I saw you with them, Ethan. I saw how you looked at that boy. You love them too." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was the truth. Something in me broke then, not with a scream, but with a sigh. All the anger drained out, leaving behind something colder, heavier. "I don't even know who you are," I whispered. "I'm still me," he pleaded. "I can fix this. I'll end it. I'll do whatever it takes." "No," I said, standing slowly. "You can't fix this. You can't erase a second life. You can't erase a child. You destroyed everything, and now there's nothing left to fix." He stood too, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Please, Clara, don't leave. Don't do this to our family." "Our family," I repeated, my voice low and shaking. "You did this to our family, not me." We stood there for a long time, staring at each other, two strangers wearing the faces of people who used to be in love. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something unexpected. Clarity. This was no longer about saving a marriage. It was about saving myself. I walked past him out of the dining room up the stairs. He followed me, begging, crying, swearing he'd change. But I didn't look back. I didn't trust my eyes anymore. When I shut the bedroom door and locked it behind me, I slid down the wall and pressed my forehead against my knees. The house was silent except for his muffled voice on the other side of the door. I knew I wasn't ready to make every decision yet about the kids, the house, the future. But one thing was certain. The woman who walked into that dinner hopping for answers was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who was done accepting scraps of love and lies dressed as loyalty. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel weak. I felt powerful. Broken, yes, devastated, absolutely, but powerful. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew one thing: whatever it would be my choice, not his. The morning after the confrontation felt unreal, like waking up in a life I didn't recognize. The house was eerily quiet. Ethan had slept on the couch, though I hadn't asked him to. I'd locked the bedroom door and listened to the occasional creak of the floorboards below, every sound a reminder that the person who had betrayed me was still under my roof. I got the kids ready for school in a daze. Emma noticed the tension instantly. "Are you and Daddy fighting?" she asked over her cereal, her wide brown eyes searching my face. "No, sweetheart," I lied, forcing a smile. "Mommy and Daddy are just talking about some grown-up things." She accepted it, but I saw the worry settle into her small features. Ben clung to my leg longer than usual before getting on the school bus, and I had to fight back tears as I waved goodbye. Once they were gone, I stood by the front door for a long time, just breathing. Ethan appeared in the doorway of the living room, his face pale and drawn. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. "Clara," he started. "I don't want to talk," I cut him off. "Please," he said softly, "we need to." I turned to face him. "You had years to talk, Ethan, years to be honest with me. You chose silence every time." He flinched but pressed on. "I know I hurt you, I know I destroyed everything, but I still love you. I want to fix this. I want us to try." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so pathetically absurd. "Fix this? How do you fix this? Do you think a few therapy sessions are going to erase the fact that you have a child with someone else?" He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "I made a mistake." "Stop calling it that," I snapped. "A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. A mistake is lying once and confessing it. You built a life with her, Ethan. A life. That's not a mistake, that's a choice you made every single day for 5 years." He looked like I'd slapped him, but I didn't care. I was done cushioning the truth. "I'm leaving," I said flatly. His eyes widened. "What?" "I don't know when or how yet," I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I'm not staying married to someone who treats me like an option. Our kids deserve a mother who respects herself enough to walk away from this." Tears welled up in his eyes. "Clara, please, don't do this. Don't tear our family apart." I stared at him for a long moment. "You tore our family apart the moment you lied to me. I'm just picking up the pieces." The next few days were a blur of logistics and emotions. I called a lawyer. I opened a new bank account. I started looking at apartments. It felt both empowering and terrifying, like learning how to breathe underwater. Every small step toward independence came with a surge of guilt. What about the kids? What about the house? But every time I saw Ethan's face, that guilt hardened into resolve. One night he knocked gently on the bedroom door. "Can we talk?" I hesitated before opening it. He was holding a photo album, our wedding pictures. "I've been going through these," he said quietly. "Do you remember that day? How happy we were." I stared at the photo of us smiling under a cascade of rose petals. I barely recognized those people. "I remember," I said. "I also remember trusting you with my whole heart." "I know I don't deserve a second chance," he said, voice trembling. "But I'm asking for one. Not for me, for us, for the kids. We can rebuild. We can go to counseling, work through this. Please don't throw it all away." I felt my chest tighten. Part of me wanted to believe him, to believe that the man I'd built a life with was still buried somewhere under the lies. But another part, the part that had watched him with another family, knew better. "Do you even love her?" I asked. His mouth opened, then closed. He looked at the floor. I don't know." "That's not good enough," I said, "because you loved her enough to risk everything, and you loved her enough to stay." He reached for me, but I stepped back. "I forgive you, Ethan," I said softly. His eyes snapped up in surprise. "Not for you, for me, because I don't want to carry this anger anymore. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean staying." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the fight had gone out of him. "What happens now?" he whispered. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I do know that whatever comes next, I'm going to choose it. For once in my life, I'm going to choose myself." The following week, we told the kids. It was one of the hardest conversations of my life. Emma cried and begged us not to split up. Ben didn't understand. He just clung to me and asked if Daddy was moving away. Ethan cried too. I didn't. I'd already shed every tear I had. We agreed he'd move into a rental apartment nearby. He'd still see the kids, still be part of their lives. But our marriage was over. The night he left, the house felt impossibly quiet. I walked through each room, touching the walls, the furniture, the photographs, relics of a life that no longer existed. In the bedroom, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared out the window at the dark street beyond. I felt everything and nothing all at once. Sadness, anger, relief, fear, they all churned together until they became something else entirely. Freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by someone else's choices. I wasn't a victim of someone else's betrayal. I was just me, raw, broken, but free. That night, I slept without dreams. When I woke up the next morning, the sun was brighter than it had been in weeks. I made breakfast with the windows open, music playing softly in the background. The kids laughed at the table, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed with them. Later, as I sipped my coffee by the window, my phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "I still love you. I'll never stop trying." I stared at it for a long moment before deleting it without replying. Because I knew now that love wasn't enough, not without trust, not without respect. And if he ever truly loved me, he would have fought for us before it was too late. I didn't know where life would take me from here. I didn't have all the answers. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty: this was the beginning of something new. And for the first time in years, that thought didn't scare me. It set me free. The days that followed Ethan's departure were some of the strangest of my life. Everything was the same, yet everything was different. The house looked the same, the routines didn't change much, but the energy was unrecognizable, quieter, lighter, lonelier. Sometimes I'd catch myself listening for his footsteps in the hallway or expecting the front door to open at 6:15 sharp. But it never did. At first, the emptiness was suffocating. Every corner of the house whispered his name, the dent in the couch cushion where he used to sit, the half-empty mug he always forgot on the kitchen counter, the scent of his aftershave still lingering in the bathroom. It was like living with a ghost. But as the days passed, something unexpected began to bloom in the silence. Space. Space to think. Space to breathe. Space to remember who I was before my life had been reduced to wife and mother. The kids adjusted better than I expected. Emma was distant at first, her teenage anger simmering under the surface. She blamed both of us him for lying, me for giving up. Ben was too young to understand. He just missed his dad. Every time Ethan came by to pick them up for his visitation weekends, Ben would run into his arms and my heart would twist. But when they returned home, tired and happy, I'd see something in their eyes, safety, stability, and I knew I'd made the right choice. I started seeing a therapist, something I'd resisted for years. At first, I sat through the sessions in silence, arms crossed, unable to untangle the mess of emotions swirling inside me. But over time, the words started to spill out. The shame, the rage, the guilt, the grief, layer by layer, I peeled them back. And beneath them all, I found something I hadn't felt in years: strength. "You spent so long shrinking yourself to fit into his world," my therapist told me one afternoon. "Now you get to build a world that fits you." That sentence haunted me in the best way. It made me look at my life differently. I realized how much I had given up for Ethan, my career, my friendships, my ambitions. Somewhere along the way, I had become a supporting character in my own story, and I didn't want to be that woman anymore. So I made changes, small ones at first. I signed up for a creative writing class at the local community center. I dusted off my resume and applied for a part-time editorial position at a publishing house downtown. I reconnected with old friends I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were hesitant at first, unsure how to approach the version of me they barely recognized. but others welcomed me back with open arms, and I was grateful for every text, every coffee date, every reminder that I wasn't alone. Ethan called often in those early weeks. At first, it was about the kids, schedules, homework, doctor's appointments, but eventually his messages shifted. I miss you. I'm still in love with you. We can fix this. I ignored most of them. Occasionally, I'd respond with a polite but firm, "This is not the time." Part of me still cared not for him, but for the man I once believed he was, and part of me pitied him. His new life wasn't the fairy tale he'd imagined. I heard whispers from mutual friends that things with Lena were rocky. Apparently, reality wasn't as glamorous as the secret had been. One evening, he asked if we could meet, just to talk. Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, a place we used to go when we were dating. The familiarity of it stung. "You look good," he said when I walked in. "Thanks," I replied, and I meant it. I did look good, healthier, stronger, lighter, like someone who had started to reclaim her life. He sighed, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I know I don't deserve it, but I want you to know I regret everything, every lie, every choice. If I could take it back, I would." I stirred my tea slowly, watching the steam curl into the air. "I believe you," I said softly, "but that doesn't change anything." He swallowed hard. "I still love you." "I know," I said, "but I don't love you anymore, at least not the way I used to." That admission hurt more than I expected, but it was the truth. The man I loved no longer existed. The version of Ethan who betrayed me had killed him, and I wasn't willing to resurrect a ghost. When I left the cafe, I felt lighter. It was the closure I didn't know I needed, not because I forgave him, but because I finally accepted that our story was over. Life didn't magically become perfect after that. There were still hard days, nights when the loneliness was unbearable, mornings when I woke up and instinctively reached for the other side of the bed. There were moments of doubt, moments when I questioned if I'd done the right thing. But every time those thoughts crept in, I reminded myself of the truth. Staying would have destroyed me. Leaving had saved me. One Saturday, months after Ethan moved out, I took the kids on a spontaneous road trip. Just the three of us, no plans, no itinerary. We drove until the city disappeared behind us, stopping at a small lake we'd never been to before. Emma skipped stones across the water while Ben chased ducks along the shore. I sat on the grass, the sun warm on my skin, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. It wasn't the life I had planned. It wasn't the life I thought I'd have. But it was ours, imperfect, messy, real, and it was enough. A few weeks later, I accepted the job at the publishing house. It wasn't glamorous or high-paying, but it was mine. It made me feel like me again, not just a mother, not just an ex-wife, but a woman with her own dreams and purpose. As the months turned into nearly a year, I realized something profound. I had forgiven him. Not because he deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Holding onto the anger only tethered me to the past, and I was ready to step into the future. I even found myself thinking about love again, not with Ethan, not yet with anyone else, but in the abstract. The possibility of it. The idea that maybe, someday, I could trust someone again. But if that day never came, that would be okay too. Because I had learned how to stand on my own, and that was a love story in itself. Every so often, Ethan still reached out, sometimes to talk about the kids, sometimes just to say hello. I kept the conversations polite but distant. Our lives were intertwined by the children we shared, but nothing more. And every time I hung up the phone, I felt grateful that I had chosen myself, grateful that I had survived the storm, and grateful that I had discovered a version of me I didn't even know existed. The day I walked out of that marriage, I thought my life had ended. But as I watched my children laughing by the lake, as I flipped through manuscripts at my new job, as I made dinner in a kitchen that now felt like mine, I realized the truth. My life hadn't ended at all. It had just begun. The first anniversary of the day Ethan walked out crept up on me quietly. No fanfare, no bitterness, just a small, strange ache when I realized how much had changed in a single year. There was a time when I thought I wouldn't survive without him, that I would crumble under the weight of betrayal. But standing in my own kitchen that morning, sunlight streaming through the windows and the smell of pancakes filling the air, I realized I hadn't just survived. I had rebuilt. Life had a new rhythm now. The kids and I had moved into a smaller house, nothing fancy, but it felt like ours. It was cozy and bright, with walls covered in their artwork and shelves stacked with books I finally had time to read. Every corner was a reflection of who we were now, not a broken family, but a stronger one. Emma had grown more resilient, too. The anger she once carried toward me had softened into understanding. She no longer asked if Daddy and I were getting back together. She knew that chapter was closed. Ben still asked questions sometimes, but I had learned to answer honestly without bitterness. Daddy and I love you very much, I'd tell him, but we're better parents when we're not together. And that was the truth. I had settled into my job at the publishing house, eventually earning a full-time position. I spent my days surrounded by stories, heartbreaks, triumphs, betrayals, redemptions, and I found pieces of myself in every manuscript I edited. My colleagues became friends, and the work became more than a paycheck. It became purpose. Evenings were my favorite time now. The three of us would cook dinner together, Emma chopping vegetables while Ben stirred sauce with dramatic flair. Afterward, we'd pile onto the couch to watch a movie or read a book aloud. It wasn't the picture-perfect family life I once envisioned, but it was real, and it was ours. Ethan's presence had faded into something distant and manageable. He still saw the kids every other weekend, and we kept our communication polite and focused on them. Occasionally, he would try to breach the boundary, a lingering conversation, a wistful remember when, but I never engaged. That chapter was sealed. His choices were his own, and I no longer carried the burden of them. Then, one evening in early spring, something unexpected happened. I received a message from a mutual acquaintance. Lena had left Ethan. She had discovered that he was seeing someone else, a pattern repeating itself, as predictable as it was pathetic. My initial reaction surprised me. I didn't feel satisfaction. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt nothing, just a quiet, distant pity. I didn't reach out to him. I didn't gloat. I didn't even bring it up the next time we spoke about the kids. His mistakes were his to live with, and I had no interest in being part of that story anymore. One evening, months later, he asked if we could meet for closure. I hesitated but agreed, knowing there was nothing left to lose. We met at the same cafe where we'd had that difficult conversation almost a year earlier. He looked tired, older, sadder, more fragile than I remembered. I wanted to apologize again, he said, his hands wrapped around a mug he barely touched. Not for getting you back, I know that's not happening, but for how deeply I hurt you. I nodded. I know you're sorry, and I forgave you a long time ago. He looked up startled. You did. Yes, I said. Not for you, for me, because carrying hatred was exhausting, and I didn't want to give it any more of my life. He was silent for a long time. Then he asked, do you think you could ever love me again? I thought about it, really thought about it, and then I shook my head. No, I don't think so, but I don't hate you either. You're the father of my children, and you're part of the story that got me here. That's enough. He nodded slowly, a sad smile tugging at his lips. I'm glad you're happy. I am, I said, and I meant it. When I walked away from that cafe, there was no anger, no regret, just peace. It was as if the final page of a long, painful chapter had turned on its own, and for the first time, the story ahead felt unwritten and full of possibility. That summer, I took the kids on a trip to the coast, something I had always wanted to do but had put off for years. We spent our days building sandcastles, collecting seashells, and watching the sun melt into the horizon. One night, as we sat by a bonfire roasting marshmallows, Emma leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Mom, she said quietly. I blinked back tears. Why? Because you didn't let what happened break you. You made something good out of something bad. Her words wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket. For so long, I'd worried about how the divorce would shape them if they'd grow up bitter or broken. But in that moment, I realized they were learning something far more valuable: strength, self-respect, resilience. On the last night of our trip, I stood on the shore alone, the waves lapping at my feet. The moon hung low and bright, and the air was cool against my skin. I thought about the woman I'd been 2 years ago, terrified, dependent, defined by someone else's choices. I barely recognized her. I whispered a quiet goodbye to the life I'd lost. It had been painful and beautiful and complicated, but it was over. Ahead of me stretched a future I hadn't planned but was excited to embrace. Maybe it would involve love again someday. Maybe it wouldn't. Either way, it would be mine. The night I tracked Ethan's GPS, I thought my life had ended. I thought the betrayal would swallow me whole. But now I knew the truth. That night wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The night the illusion shattered was the night I started to wake up. And as the waves rolled over my feet and the stars spread out above me, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, something simple, something profound. I felt free,